You see it right there, don't you? That flat, ground-hugging mat of green spreading out between your flowers, creeping across the gravel, filling every crack in the path. Spotted spurge. It looks small, it looks harmless. It is neither. Here is the truth most gardeners never hear. You will never win against spurge by pulling it. Not really. You beat it with one piece of timing that happens in a narrow window each season, and almost everybody misses it. I missed it for years. I pulled and pulled, and it came back thicker every single summer, and I could not understand why. So stick with me to the end, because I am going to share a discovery made by a scientist at Iowa State University, something he stumbled onto almost by accident that lets you stop spurge before it ever pushes through the soil. And this works whether you have 3 little plants in a flower bed or a whole side yard buried under it. I have been there with both. Let me take you back a few summers. I had one raised bed I was proud of, full of salvia and coneflower, and one July morning I knelt down to weed and realized the whole floor of that bed had gone green underneath my plants. Not moss, spurge. A solid living carpet I had somehow not noticed spreading day by day. I grabbed a handful, yanked, and it snapped off clean at the surface, leaving the root behind and bleeding the strange milky white sap onto my fingers. That was the morning I finally decided to actually understand this weed instead of just fighting it, and everything I learned that season is what I am about to hand you over this fence. Let me start with something that surprised me, because it changes how you fight this plant completely. That milky white sap that oozes out when you snap a spurge stem is not an accident. It is a weapon. That sap is a latex, and it carries compounds that irritate skin and eyes and taste foul to almost anything that might eat it. So the rabbits leave it alone. The deer leave it alone. The insects that chew through half your garden will not touch it. That is one of the reasons spurge spreads so freely while your beloved plants get nibbled to the stem. Nothing in nature is keeping it in check. If you have sensitive skin, that sap can leave you with a rash. So I want you wearing gloves from this point on. I learned that with an itchy wrist for a week. Now, here is the part that matters. Spotted spurge, the botanical name is Euphorbia maculata, is a summer annual. That means it lives one single season. It sprouts, it spreads, it sets seed, and it dies when the cold comes. And a lot of gardeners take comfort in that. They think, well, it will die in winter anyway, so why fight it? That thinking is exactly the trap. Because before that little plant dies, it does something staggering. According to the University of California Integrated Pest Management Program, one single spurge plant can produce several thousand seeds in one season. Some counts run past 3,000 seeds from one plant you could cover with your hand. And those seeds do not all sprout at once. They can sit in your soil, waiting for years. So the spurge you ignore this July is not one summer of weeds. It is the next 5 summers of weeds, quietly loading itself into your soil. That is why pulling never felt like it worked for me. I was pulling the parent and leaving behind thousands of children I could not even see. So understanding this weed's whole life is the first move. But once you understand how it seeds, the next question becomes urgent. And it is the question that cost me 2 whole growing seasons. How do you actually remove it without making the problem worse? Because here is the thing nobody warned me about. The way most of us instinctively pull spurge is the exact way we spread it. Let me show you what I mean. When spurge matures, those tiny seeds sit in little capsules tucked along the stems, and when they are ripe, the lightest touch makes them burst and scatter. So when you grab a mature seeding spurge plant and yank it out and give it a shake, you are not removing seeds. You are broadcasting them. You are doing the plant's job for it, flinging the next generation across the very soil you just cleared. I did this for years, congratulating myself on a clean bed while planting next summer's carpet with my own 2 hands. So timing is everything, and this is the window that matters. You want to pull spurge young, before it flowers and sets those seed capsules. In most of the country, that means catching it in late spring and very early summer, when the plants are still small and green and have not yet started blooming those tiny pinkish white flowers. Once you see flowers, you are already behind, and you have to be far more careful. Here is exactly how I do it now. I wait for the soil to be moist, either after a rain or after I have watered, because spurge has a single central taproot, and in dry, hard soil that root snaps and leaves the growing point behind to regrow. In moist soil, the whole thing slides out. I grip low, right at the base where the stems all meet, and I pull slow and steady, straight up, to bring that taproot with it. And if the plant is already carrying seed, I do not shake it. I slide a bag or a bucket right up under it and lift it in gently so the seeds go in the bag and not back on the ground. And do not toss those seeding plants in your compost pile. Most home compost never gets hot enough to kill spurge seed, so you would just be brewing a batch and spreading it back through your beds next year. In the bin they go, out with the trash. Do that, and you will clear what is already there. It genuinely works, and there is real satisfaction in lifting a whole plant, taproot and all, in one clean pull. But clearing what is there only solves today. The bigger question, the one that separates people who fight spurge forever from people who finally beat it, is this. Why did the spurge choose your soil in the first place? Because it did choose it. And until you understand that, it will keep coming back no matter how carefully you pull. Here is something I wish someone had told me 20 years ago. Spurge is not really the problem. Spurge is a symptom. Think about where you actually see it. You see it in the cracks of the driveway. You see it in the thin, worn patches of the lawn where the grass gave up. You see it in bare, baked soil between plants and along the hot edges of beds. You almost never see it thriving in the middle of a thick, lush, healthy lawn or a well-mulched bed. And that is not luck. That is biology. Spotted spurge is what gardeners call a pioneer plant. It is built by nature to colonize disturbed, compacted, poor, exposed ground where finer plants struggle. It loves heat. It loves compaction. It loves bare soil that bakes in the sun. Clemson Cooperative Extension and the University of California both point to the same conditions again and again: thin turf, compacted soil, and open, bare ground. Spurge is nature rushing in to cover ground that nothing else is covering. So every patch of spurge is really a little flag your garden is waving, telling you the soil right there is stressed, hard, or bare. And this is where I have to speak directly to you if your situation already feels hopeless. Maybe you are not dealing with three little plants. Maybe you are looking at a whole area that has been taken over, soil that has been carpeted with spurge for 2 or 3 summers running, and you are thinking this advice about pulling young plants is lovely, but it is far too late for you. I promise you it is not. This next part is for you especially, for the established, stubborn, already out of control patch, because you can turn that ground around this very season without digging the whole thing up and starting over. Here is what I did with my worst area, a strip along the south fence that had gone almost solid spurge. First, I cleared the mature plants the careful way I just described, bagging them so I was not seeding as I went. Then, instead of leaving that soil bare, which is exactly the invitation spurge is waiting for, I attacked the reason it was there. That soil was hard as a road. So I took a garden fork and I pushed it in and rocked it back and forth every few inches across the whole strip, breaking up the compaction without flipping the soil over and dragging buried seed to the surface. Loosening it, letting it breathe, letting water actually sink in instead of running off that baked crust. If your spurge is in a lawn, the same thinking applies. A thin, struggling lawn is an open door. Core aerating in the growing season, then overseeding those thin patches thick with grass, then feeding that grass so it fills in dense, is how you shut the door. Spurge cannot get a foothold where the grass is thick, because those seeds simply cannot compete. You are not just removing the weed, you are removing the vacancy that invited it. That fence strip that was once solid spurge is now planted and mulched and holds its own. It took one season, not a rebuild. So no matter how bad yours looks right now, the ground can come back. But loosening the soil and thickening the lawn deals with the plants already growing and the space they were using. It does not yet deal with the thousands of seeds still sitting in that soil, waiting for their moment. And their moment is decided by one single thing that most gardeners never even think about. Miss it, and every bit of work you just did gets undone by next summer. That is the whole picture coming together, and it is more layered than most gardening advice ever gets into. If you want every step of this laid out in one place, season by season, soil fix by soil fix, I put together a complete guide in my digital book, The Full Bloom System, and it covers not just spurge, but the whole cycle of building a garden that weeds genuinely struggle to invade. It is $47, and it is linked in the description below. Gardeners who have gone through it tell me the timing sections alone changed how they think about every weed they face, not just this one. Now, Back to the piece that ties all of this together, because understanding the seed bank is only half the battle. So let me tell you what those seeds are actually waiting for, because once you know it, you hold the real key. Spurge seeds need two things to wake up. They need warmth and they need light. Both. And that second one, light, is the crack in the armor almost nobody uses. Let me take the warmth first, because it sets your calendar. Spurge seeds do not germinate in the cold. They wait until the soil warms up, and the research points to a fairly precise trigger. Spurge begins germinating once. Soil temperatures at the surface hold steady around 60 degrees, and it really takes off as the soil climbs into the 60s and 70s. In much of the United States and the United Kingdom, that means the germination window opens somewhere from early to mid-spring, depending on how far north you are and how warm your season runs. That timing matters enormously, because everything you do to stop spurge has to happen before that soil hits that temperature. Once the ground is warm and the seeds have sprouted, you are back to pulling. But if you act while the soil is still cool in that late winter into early spring window, you can stop the whole thing before it starts. A soil thermometer costs just a few dollars and takes the guesswork out completely. I push mine into the bed in early spring and check it on the warm days. When it starts creeping toward the mid-50s, I know my window is now. Now here is the light part, and this is the piece that quietly does more than anything else. Spurge seeds are tiny, and they carry almost no energy reserves, so they can only sprout from right at the soil surface in the top quarter inch or so, where they can reach sunlight almost immediately. A seed buried deeper, or a seed sitting under a blanket that blocks the light, simply cannot make it. It stays dormant, it waits, so you can starve those seeds of light. In a flower bed or around shrubs or trees, that means mulch, and it means the right depth. A thin scattering does nothing. You want a layer of mulch about 3 inches deep, bark or wood chips or shredded leaves, laid over clean soil after you have cleared the existing weeds. 3 inches. That depth blocks the light those surface seeds are desperate for, and it keeps the soil underneath cooler and more even, which works against the warmth trigger too. The University of California specifically recommends mulch in the range of 2 to 3 inches to suppress spurge, and in my own beds it has been the single most reliable thing I do. Where I keep 3 inches of mulch, I barely see spurge at all. Where the mulch is thinned out and bare soil peeks through, that is exactly where it returns. So now you have the whole picture. Pull it young and bag it. Fix the compacted, hungry soil that invited it. Thicken your lawn. Blanket your beds in 3 inches of mulch to rob the seeds of light, and time your work to the cool soil before germination. Do those things and you will already be ahead of 99 gardeners out of 100. But there is one more piece. And this is the one I promised you at the beginning, the one that feels almost like a secret because of where it came from and how long it stayed buried under ordinary advice. This is for the open lawn, and for anyone who wants to stop spurge without reaching for a harsh chemical. This is the part I want you to remember when everything else fades. Back in the late 1980s, at Iowa State University, a turfgrass researcher named Dr. Nick Christians was running experiments that had nothing to do with weeds. He was studying a disease in grass, and he was using a byproduct of milling corn, a plain, ordinary substance called corn gluten meal, the same kind of thing used in animal feed. And he noticed something he was not looking for. In the plots where the corn gluten meal had been spread, the grass grew fine, but the weed seeds would not root properly. The seeds would sprout, but their tiny new roots failed to develop, and the little seedlings dried up and died before they could establish. He had stumbled onto a natural pre-emergent, not a poison that kills growing plants, but something that stops seeds from successfully rooting as they germinate. He and the university studied it, and it was patented as a natural weed control product. And to this day, corn gluten meal is sold as an organic pre-emergent for exactly this purpose. It came out of a happy accident in a research plot, and careful organic gardeners have quietly relied on it ever since, even as most mainstream advice kept pointing people toward the same old bag of synthetic weed killer. Here is how you use it against spurge, and here is why the timing we talked about matters so much. Corn gluten meal only works on seeds that are germinating. It does nothing to a plant that is already growing, and it does nothing to seed still fast asleep. So you spread it in that cool soil window in early spring, right before those spurge seeds would naturally wake up. You are laying down the barrier just before the alarm goes off. The typical rate is around 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet of lawn, worked in lightly and then watered in to activate it. followed by a few dry days so those failing weed seedlings do not get a second chance to recover. And here's the part I love. Corn gluten meal is roughly 10% nitrogen by weight, so as it breaks down over the following weeks, it quietly feeds your lawn. It is stopping the weed seeds and fertilizing your grass at the same time, thickening the very turf that crowds Spurge out. It is doing two of our jobs at once. One thing to remember, it does not tell the difference between a weed seed and a grass seed, so you never use it in the same few weeks that you are trying to sow new grass. It is for established lawn, not fresh seeding. Get that timing separated, and it works beautifully. Now, I want to be honest with you the way a friend should be, because I do not want you disappointed. Corn gluten meal is not a magic dust that erases Spurge in one weekend. In the first year, it typically knocks the weeds back by a modest amount, but its real power shows across 2 and 3 seasons, because each year fewer Spurge seeds succeed, so fewer plants set new seed, so the seed bank in your soil shrinks and shrinks. It is patient, and it compounds. It works with the plant's own life cycle instead of just fighting the symptom. That is exactly why it stayed a quiet favorite among organic growers while flashier products got all the attention. It rewards the gardener who understands timing, and now that gardener is you. So put it all together and picture what this looks like next summer. You walk out to that bed that used to go green underneath your flowers by July, and the soil is dark and covered and cool under 3 inches of mulch, and there is nothing creeping across it. You look at the lawn strip that used to be a solid mat, and the grass is thick and the Spurge has no gap to slip into. You are not on your knees pulling the same weed for the 4th year running. You finally got ahead of it because you understood what it needed and you took it away before it could start. That is the whole thing, really. You do not defeat Spurge by being stronger than it. You defeat it by being earlier than it and by refusing to leave it the bare, baked, sunlit soil it came for. If you have nursed a garden for years, you already know that feeling of walking out one morning and finding something taking over the ground you worked so hard to build. And you know it is not really about the weed. It is about protecting the plants you love, the beds you have poured seasons into, the little corner of the world you made with your own hands. You are the kind of gardener who refuses to just shrug and let it go, and that is exactly why you are going to win this one. So tell me, where is your Spurge hiding right now? The driveway cracks, the lawn, or right in among your flowers? And which spot are you going to treat first, the mulch or the corn gluten meal? Leave me a comment and tell me where in the world you are gardening from too, because the timing shifts depending on how warm your spring runs, and I read every single one. If this helped you finally understand what you have been fighting, come along with the rest of us who refuse to let bad advice cost us the plants and gardens we love. And keep an eye out, because next I am going to show you how to stop crabgrass from ever taking over your lawn again. And there is a spring soil temperature window for that one too, that most people blow right past. Do not miss it. You're still here. That tells me you truly care about your garden. Inside my membership, the Blooming Garden Circle, I continue right where this video stops. And you can ask me your own question directly. A real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. So many gardeners like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel any time, no risk. Now that your garden's free of that stubborn Spurge, let me show you the one simple thing your perennials truly need every June to bloom fuller and stronger all season long. It's starting right here.